Welcome back.
Be not afraid. Be not afraid.
Is that your...
It's my St. John Paul II.
Oh,
I've been listening to some lo-fi on Hallow where they've got one of those where he's just like peppered throughout, and it's just like, wow, this is cool. Like the man opened his pontificate with those words. Be not afraid. Open wide the doors of the church, right? Be not afraid to go out and like take the love of Christ everywhere in the world. But folks, often we are afraid.
Yeah.
And often we have thoughts about being afraid, right? That can keep us and keep our fear in the dark and actually, yes, keep us victim, keep us bound to this fear. We want to help you to break those bonds with the love of Christ and the power of Christ, but also with some mindset work here. So we're going to give you some hacks on how you can start to process through some of this fear so that you're not bound by it anymore. You have the freedom to be fully who you are, united with Christ, and on mission with the Lord.
I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, see you guys in there.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome. Clink. Welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Podcast. My name is Matt. This is Aaron over here with a big gulp of coffee. And we're going to be your Catholic coaches for the next, 40 minutes or so.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today, Aaron?
Today we're talking about your relationship with fear.
Boo.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The definition, well, it's kind of funny because it's, Halloween time.
When we're recording this, it's going to drop sometimes after Halloween, but...
Maybe not. Maybe this could be our Halloween week episode.
Ooh.
But really, the whole idea of this entire podcast is, does fear own you? Mm-hmm. Are you owned by fear? Like what is our relationship with fear? And I think it's a good question to ask because I think fear is a dynamic emotion. There's a lot of elements going on in it, but like, what is your relationship with fear and how do you respond to it?
Yeah. And how do you respond? How do you perceive fear when you encounter it? Because fear is an emotion, right? It's all of the emotions are very neutral. By God's design, they're neutral. They don't necessarily have a moral quality to them. And you might be thinking, well, God says, be not afraid, be not afraid, be not afraid. And so therefore, when I feel fear, is there something immoral about that? It's like, no, we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
Really how to approach that. It doesn't need to be a shame-inducing emotion that you feel. But it is always an invitation. Okay. And this is what we even see. Maybe you've listened to some of our podcasts on triggers. Right? When we feel triggered, it's a reactive fear response. We perceive there to be something that we that we need to be afraid of.
Yeah.
Right? And even there, triggers are trailheads. So we can take that and there's an invitation to explore a little bit more depth to where the Lord is saying, hey, I want access to this area that you haven't given me access to in your life a little bit more. But tell me a little bit more here, Aaron, on fear. You got this cool song, the breakup song.
Yeah.
That addresses this.
Yeah. It's kind of like as if I love this song. Francesca Battistelli. Go check it out. It's called The Breakup Song. And at first I was like, oh, is this like between her and a guy? I often just listen to the tune of music. I rarely listen to the lyrics. But then it took me like days to figure out. I was like, oh, she's singing to fear. And she's talking about like breaking up with fear.
It's pretty rad.
It's a really cool song. Go listen to it. But when we don't ask this question of like, does fear own me or do I own it? Mm-hmm. Right? Like it kind of, we start to feel victims to fear. We start to be even afraid of fear. We give ownership over to them, to fear. And it's in what we give attention and focus and ownership and power over to, we allow to own us. And I heard this quote the other day and it was like a game changer for me. It was like very perfect for this episode. Mm-hmm. But it was, fear is a sneaky form of idolatry. Okay?
Interesting.
When we are afraid of something, we hand over our power to it. Okay? And what we hand our power over to, we indirectly worship it.
Interesting.
We give ownership to it. We bow down to it, right? Because we're going. And guys, the only thing that we are supposed to be handing our will over to, or the only person that we're supposed to be handing our will over to, is God. Mm-hmm. But when we're afraid of something, and then we're afraid of fear, right? Afraid of feeling fear, like we're handing our ownership and our free will over to that.
Yeah. So I think of the famous quote from FDR, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, like the only thing that we need to fear is fear itself. Which
terrible
is
advice.
And I can kind of see what he's talking about. He's just like getting into, but like at the same time, imagine if we were afraid of fear. And that's what we want to address here, you guys, because we want to help you to process through the fear. But if you have all of these thoughts on top about, and all these judgments of yourself for feeling a very neutral emotion of fear, that means that there's something, you're making it mean that there's something wrong with you, or there's something unholy about you, or like you're in trouble or something like that, then you're never really going to get beyond the fear. You're going to make an idol out of it. You're going to give it way more focus than it's necessary. Yeah. I love looking at just like, again, triggers are trailheads. Mm-hmm. Fear is often just that feeling of fear. I see it as the manifestation of Jesus knocking on a door to our hearts that we have not yet let him into.
Yeah, those
and it's
places.
That perfect love. Yes, that perfect. So where the Lord is absent, where charity is absent, and the Lord wants to always reveal those places where charity is absent in our lives and in our hearts. Yeah, that's where that sensation of fear comes up, because where love enters, it casts out fear.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like that distinction. The part one of this podcast, really what we're going to be talking about is our response to the emotion of fear is our choice.
Yeah.
Our response to the emotion of fear. So you were talking about fear, and some of those and guys, fear keeps us alive. There is a reason for fear. There's a reason why God gave us the emotion of fear. It keeps us alive. It protects us. It helps us to move out of the way of like a truck coming at us in the middle of the road. And then we feel adrenaline in our body. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So we have this emotion of fear. God is not saying, like in the Bible, when it said, be not afraid or do not fear, like so many times, I've heard 365 times.
It's not true.
But it's not true. I don't know. But
fact check that.
But there is a lot of times it's written in the Bible, but they're saying choose not to be afraid. So like, what they're not saying to not be human and not feel this emotion of fear, but they are saying choose not to be afraid in response to that. Don't continue to be afraid beyond that. I think of this thought just came to mind. It's not, I don't know what the name of the book is, but they talk about like gazelles in the wild, and after a lion chases it.
Yeah, it's called Zebras. Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
That's what I'm thinking about. Okay, so why zebras don't get ulcers? Because the zebras don't sit around and worry right after it. Like, what happens to their body? Do you remember?
They literally shake it off, like Taylor Swift. They go through like a shake of, and as they're expelling a lot of those chemicals in their bodies that have mobilized their bodies to get away from the lion that's attacking them. And they shake that stuff off, and then they're just chilling and they're eating again. But they're not stewing on these things and living in this chemical cocktail that's eroding their internal organs, like we have with ulcers.
But we do that.
We
have an intellect.
Yes.
And we're abusing our intellect when we're sitting there and like focusing on it and ruminating on it.
Yeah, we can learn something from the gazelle and from the zebra. Shake it off, baby. We can learn something from just what the Lord is revealing to us here, and looking at the effects of our lives. And
I think that's why it's said so many times in the Bible, be not afraid.
Yeah.
And I just want to make that distinction. Like, it's not the emotion. He's not saying like, don't feel fear ever. But it's be not afraid beyond that point of fear.
Yes. And the beautiful thing here, folks, if we can approach this two ways, okay? We can approach it from a way of bootstrapping, where it's our responsibility to rationalize and kind of reframe, and that could be part of it. There's some ownership there. And so that we no longer are afraid of the thing. Or we can do it with the Lord, right? And we can make it so that we're like David standing before Goliath, but we're armed with the word of God. Like that was the big difference, that David, there's arguably some prudent fear that was there, but he wasn't afraid because he knew who was with him. He knew who was standing in his corner. And so that is the beautiful frame that we get to have as Catholic Christians or Christians, is that we know that God is in our corner with us. And when God is with us, who could possibly be against us? Makes a big difference here. And so when the Lord commands us, I think there's an important piece. When the Lord commands us to be not afraid, he's doing it knowing that he's going to give us the gift, give us the grace to actually fulfill the command that he's giving to us. Same thing with the Sermon on the Mount, right? He really raises the moral stakes of what it means to be a member of Christ's family, all right? Above and beyond what the Jewish expectations were. And there was like a little bit of reluctance, like, man, who could ever fulfill this? But when we look at that in the context of Christ's Spirit being given to us and being in us and transforming us, so it's no longer we who live, but Christ who lives with us, Christ can accomplish anything, all right? And Christ in us can accomplish anything. Christ in us can overcome this fear, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So how do we do it?
Yeah. You've got kind of some steps here, Aaron, so I want to like lay out, just get on the same page with you.
Yeah.
All right, so we just kind of went through just a little bit of a recap on fear and how it's part of it's our choice and everything. Is now we're going to get into like just getting in touch with our own personal response to fear. Okay, because fear shows up, we experience it differently than other people, and a lot of that has to do with temperament, right? And we're afraid of some things, not necessarily other things, and other people are afraid of those things that we're not afraid of, right? So there's a little bit of that, and there's some self-compassion that we can learn as we kind of get in touch with the unique ways that fear shows up in us. But then also having named that fear, having given it a face, right? Yeah. Personifying it, how do we want to choose to address it, right? And so that's really going to be a very empowering exercise that we're going to walk you through. You guys can use this in some of your own self-coaching to process through this fear, so you don't have to feel powerless against it, but you can actually feel like you got Christ working in you against this fear.
Yeah, yeah. I like kind of like using the power of story with this. I think that's why that song was so impactful to me. I'm just going to read the chorus to you guys so you can kind of picture yourself like as if you're like in a room with this personified version of fear and you're about ready to break up with them. But also you have like Jesus next to you, okay? So, but here's the chorus part of the song. It says, "Fear you don't own me." Okay, imagine you're breaking up with this thing. "Fear you don't own me. There ain't no room in this story. And I ain't got time for you. Telling me what I'm not. Like you know me. Well, guess what? I know who I am. I know I am strong. And I am free. Got my own identity. So fear, you will never be welcome here." Boom. Mic drop. Imagine like if somebody broke up with you like that. And like she like continues like to repeat it. Okay, so I want you guys to picture fear in your life. Like what would be the personified version of fear? I like actually personally going to the Inside Out character of fear.
Yeah, it's kind of
it is kind of like minimize it a little bit. It is kind of silly. It's just like fear is like afraid of everything. Isn't it Bill Hader's voice? I think
so. Boo! Pick a plot.
Yeah. Yes. You guys have to see that movie if you haven't seen it yet. Inside Out. So like, what does fear look like? Like if you were about ready to break up with it, like what does fear look like? Personify it. This is actually, I think it's called acceptance and commitment therapy. Have you guys ever heard of that? So what some of the things that they do is they'll kind of like personify things or like read a thought out loud in like a different tone of voice or whatever. And it just helps reframe the situation. But from Aquinas' standpoint, what we're using right now is our imagination. And we're just kind of like being a little bit more factual about it. So like pray, ask the Lord, what does this look like? I want you guys to write these questions down because I want you to really take this in your prayer journal. What does fear look like? If fear was a character or a person, what does it look like? And
I want to talk, I'm going to break the fourth wall here real quick, as if we're not already talking to you guys. But like, if if you actually write the questions down whenever Aaron asks you to write the questions down, could you comment below if you're watching this on YouTube? I want I write the questions down. Like, I want to know, or if it's like, no, I never write the questions down, but I think of them. Like, I want to know how you guys actually interact with the podcast. Would be helpful for us.
Yeah.
All right. And like and subscribe while you're making that comment. Continue, Aaron.
Great. All right. So what does fear look like to you? How do they act? What do they say? What is your response to them? I'm going to add one more question. Why are you breaking up with fear?
Why do you want to add that question?
Just because, I want you guys to find evidence. Like, what does fear do to you? Like, why are you breaking up with them? Yeah. If any of those words, like any of that chorus that I just read out, like, you're like, yeah, kind of got you fired up. You're like, I know. I'm strong. Yeah, like, no, I know my identity. Like, you don't own me. Stop telling me who I am. Mm-hmm. So what is your response to this character? And how much ownership and power do you give to this fear? If you were in a relationship with it, like, how much ownership and power do you give to it? Mm-hmm. Just something to reflect on. These are just some of the questions. So we want to see, okay, what is fear like? And what would it look like if I were to break up with fear? Just even in one area of my life. Like, maybe not all the fear all the time, but if I were to just break up with this choice of continuing to ruminate on something, what would that look like?
What's that feel like?
What does it feel like?
Even that. Like, what is that even?
Is it empowering?
I think so.
Is it scary?
Well, I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here. Why would somebody want to stay in a relationship with fear? All right. I think maybe if I'm putting an argument here, I think fear has a way of projecting blame for us not getting ultimately what we want onto something else. And when we can project blame, we can abdicate responsibility, and we don't necessarily have to be responsible. There is some appeal to being a victim. Right?
Sure, it's easy.
The victim is like, easy. I don't have to be responsible. Like, somebody else is the cause of this. And so there's nothing I have to change. There's no area where I really need to grow. I'm good as I am. Yeah. And there can be some comfort that's there. Right? So that's just me playing devil's advocate a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's I'm good where I'm at. Right? That's a thought here. Is that really true? Mm-hmm. Right? Are you happy where you're at? Are you happy in that story? Happy telling that victim story? Or do you want to move on to something else? Do you feel tied down or held back by that story? It's like, okay, well, maybe there's an invitation here to be able to move past that fear, or even there, start to build a little bit of desire to break up with that fear. Yeah,
I like that. It's kind of like, you might not be ready for it yet, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But bring that to God, bring that, because it was a command throughout the Bible, be not afraid, do not fear, don't continue to ruminate in it. And if he's asking you to do it so many times in the Bible, it's going to give you the hope and the faith to do it.
Well, I like that you just said, allow yourself to be there. It's cool if you guys are like, you know what, I kind of like this place. It still feels protective, right? Yes. But that is a really good thing to share with the Lord, right? And it's like, okay, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. That is such an amazing, we can learn so much from that prayer. And I love that story. This is where Christ comes down after the transfiguration. He meets the demoniac and his father, right? And the disciples have not been able to cast out this demon, and Christ goes to the father, and he's just like, what do you want me to do? And the father says, if you can deliver my son, cast out this demon. Yeah. And Christ says, if I can, right? And so this guy, he just doesn't necessarily have this faith, and he recognizes that he doesn't really believe. There's something, maybe he's had his son has been like this since birth. He's been like this forever, since he was a boy. And so he's been dealing with this and kind of moved into this place of acceptance where he's got all of his coping mechanisms that he's built up to, so he can live with the reality of his son being possessed by a demon. And he's lost a lot of hope in this. And he finally gives a little bit of hope in this prayer. He says, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, right? And I remember, Aaron, when you dove into the not the epigenetics, but what's the word?
The lexicon.
The lexicon
it's like the
of this.
explanation of it.
And it's just like, Lord, I believe. And it's kind of like this, I believe in my head, help my unbelief. Like this desire, this area of doubt that I have. No, I believe,
it was too different. It was belief was a choice. It was like an act of the will. Like, Lord, there's a choice of an intellectual thing.
Yes.
And then the help my unbelief, that word was the emotion of doubt.
Yes.
Which isn't reasonable, which isn't really, it's just kind of a byproduct of like, I don't know if it's going to happen or not. You know,
it's like, make this journey from head to heart. Like I don't want any of this fear here anymore, Lord. And what happened? Like the Lord worked with that prayer.
Yeah.
The guy wasn't perfect yet, and he made that prayer,
and he knew
and he brought it to the Lord, and he's like, help my unbelief. And the Lord answered that prayer. He helped his unbelief, and he healed his son at that moment. And so point being here, folks, be honest with where you're at. If you like this place where you're afraid because it feels protective, share that with the Lord, right? But also it's important to hold that tension that the Lord says, be not afraid. And so if that fear is there, even if it feels comfortable, intellectually, the beginning is saying, okay, I know I feel comfortable with this fear. I don't really want to move away from that, but I want to move away from that.
Yes.
And just prepare that or share that with the Lord.
That was my start of like quitting smoking. It was just like, Lord, I don't want to quit smoking yet. This was like years ago. I don't even know how long ago it was, but Lord, I know I don't want to quit smoking yet, but like I want to quit it. You know?
I wanna.
I wanna.
It's a great prayer.
This is, so if you, exactly what you're saying, if you're like, I'm not there yet, but I want to actually obey what you're telling us to do, you know? Lord, give me the grace and the desire to even start to desire that more.
Yeah. So here, let's kind of enter into the final portion of the podcast.
Sure.
This is just some hacks, some self-coaching questions that we always like to give you guys, practical on how you can start to challenge some of the fear here. Okay, so just as we're going into this, what we're doing and what these questions start to do is they start to take what could be a very irrational fear, and when we're in that, it can feel very like it's got us in some sort of bondage. And there's something that's very very human about this. All right, when we are feeling fear, one of the things that starts to happen is we start to lose some of our cognitive capacity in our prefrontal cortex, which is where a lot of our reasoned thinking is happening. And so it's hard to reason your way or talk therapy your way through fear when you are in fear itself.
Yeah.
Okay. So people, extreme example, learn this on when guys are say having a flashback, a PTSD flashback, and they are living in the fear. You can't be like, so tell me what's going on right now, because literally that part of their brain that can process through it is shut off. Right? That's an extreme case with it. And so there's a different approach that you need to take with it. Right? But if you're not in a complete shutdown phase, what we want to do is just start to open up your mind to consider how the thing that you're afraid of may not necessarily be as scary as you think it is. All right? And so this starts to have an effect on our bodies, on our thinking and our emotions, where that amygdala starts to kind of quiet down, calm down, and release our prefrontal cortex to be more engaged, right? And so we can start to think clearly, and then our emotional life starts to be ordered towards reason, all right? Which is what Aquinas would call a consequent emotion, right? Emotions that are actually subject to reason, which is how God originally designed our emotions to be. Subservient to reason, not justifying or dictating to our reason what it should be thinking based on the emotion that we're feeling. That's the opposite way, okay? So, Erin, let's start to work through this.
The funny way that you were saying that, I thank you for all of that. This is, I was just like looking at the questions here. I'm like, and a picture that came to mind is like, you know how when you guys, I don't know, if anybody out there has ever walked a friend through a breakup, like these were some questions I probably would have asked them. So, like, imagine that you're breaking up with this fear, and, like, I'm your friend who's sitting here being like, okay, what if this person didn't own you? And I know what people think. Like, he doesn't own me. It's like, yeah, but you're giving him a lot of power over your emotions. So, like, what if they didn't own you? How might you be wrong about this person, this fear?
So that's our first question.
Yeah.
What if this fear didn't own you?
Yep, that's question number 1. But also, how might you be wrong about this fear? You know, because Matt was saying it earlier. It's like, it's so opposite too. Like, but we think it's protective. We think that ruminating, that choosing to ruminate on these scary things is protective. Like, if I think about this stuff now, then maybe I'll protect myself in the future. But the only thing you're doing is just generating more fear.
Yeah.
In your body.
There's a difference. So what we're doing here, folks, is we're leaning into the fear.
Yes.
With curiosity.
Yeah.
That is very different from ruminating on the fear. So ruminating on the fear, you're thinking of your brain is going on a mission of finding all the evidence.
Yeah.
All the evidence on why you ought to be afraid. All right. And that's just going to create more and more fear. Next thing you know, you're going to be creating ulcers, right? But the zebra, right? The zebra lets go.
Yeah.
But we're not zebras. We're humans, right? So this is a way for humans to start letting go of the fear, and it comes with curiosity, because again, the Lord wants to bring everything into the light, and for us to be able to see clearly what it is that we are that we're afraid of.
Yeah.
All right. Curiosity has a way of undoing fear. Okay.
Yeah. How might the opposite of your response to this fear be true? Like, how might the opposite be true? I know that for me, I would probably go to scripture at this point. I'd be like, well, in scripture, it says it so many times to not be afraid. Like, so, if it's a choice, maybe I don't, maybe I'm going to choose not to. Yeah.
Okay. All right. What's another question?
I like this one. What if the only power that fear gets, sorry, it was a typo. What if the only power that fear gets is the power that you give it? And that is true. That's a principle.
Yeah.
That is a principle in life. Not just with fear, but like, what if that's true?
Yeah.
I like what if questions because it expands your mind a little bit more.
Well, guys, questions create curiosity, and curiosity is an antidote to fear, right? So it's, I love this next. What if fear is not an emergency? So fear can often, it manifests itself in this urgency. I got to get away from it right now.
Yeah.
And
impatience.
It's like, what if actually this wasn't as urgent? This impending doom that you have in your mind wasn't so imminent. What if it wasn't so upon you? What if you could actually take a tactical pause?
Yeah.
And just reassess the situation, and you didn't have to respond in fear.
Yeah. What if fear isn't that scary? You know, it's another way of asking that first one. But I like kind of going to my personified version of that fear, like that, character from, it's actually kind of funny. Like fear is actually kind of funny. Like it's a funny character on Inside Out. So like, what if I'm wrong about it being scary?
Yeah. I love this one that you got. What if I'm a pro at feeling fear?
It's true.
Just be a pro at it.
Guys, we are all pros at it. Most of the time when we're afraid of feeling afraid, like we're already dealing with it. So like, we're just really good at it, actually. Like, what if it's not something that we have to necessarily run away from?
Yeah.
It's just there. Like, it doesn't mean that we can't choose to not to let go of it. But I think there's like something about that question has helped me with a lot of other emotions too. It's like, what if I'm just like really good at feeling disappointed? Like I already know how to do this.
And work through it.
And maybe from this point forward, I'm just not going to choose it anymore.
Yeah, well, I like to go with disappointment. So what was helpful for me with disappointment, I think we can do the same thing here with fear. When I realized that disappointment, the only purpose of disappointment, that emotion, is to reveal to me that I had an expectation and reality fell somewhere below that expectation.
Yeah.
And that emotion of disappointment reveals that reality.
Yeah.
Right? Or at least that the perception, or I'm perceiving that reality a lot is at some place, and I had an expectation, and there's a gap between the two of them. When I realized that that's the purpose of disappointment, it's like, okay, well, now that I've realized that disappointment has done its job, I don't need to continue to indulge in the disappointment anymore. It's revealed to me that there's just some work to do. And so now, how do I move forward here? Because I know disappointment never gets me to the next appointment. Well, I can start to, either adjust my expectation or reattack or say, okay, this is now we're going to move forward. That fear is the same. We can do the same thing with it. What is fear revealing to us? It reveals to us that there's some perceived evil that is
like a harm
that is coming at us, that is imminent. Yeah. And we are powerless to address it, right? Well, maybe that's not the case.
Right. Maybe we're wrong about that.
We could be wrong about that.
Maybe this is avoidable, or maybe this isn't impossible to overcome, especially if we have Jesus, right? Who literally said, like, what do you say? What am I thinking of?
Be not afraid?
No, be not afraid, but also like, nothing is impossible with God.
Yes, right? Yes. And it's like, don't fear the person that could, you have this later on, don't fear the person that can harm the body, but he that can actually destroy your soul. Like that's the thing that's worthwhile of fearing. But here's the thing. We don't have to fear somebody destroying our soul when we are united with God. Yeah. So this is the thing. The big difference is where we can actually not be afraid is when we're in union with God. Mm-hmm. But when we're outside of relationship with God, there's a prudent fear that's there because we are now vulnerable to the one that can actually destroy our souls. And that's where Christ, for eternity. Yeah. And so that's where there's some prudent fear that's there. Right. Christ says, be afraid of this.
Yes.
But you don't have to be when you're in relationship.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the relationship makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. I love this next question here, Erin, because this oftentimes when I'm coaching and we are addressing a fear, just by asking this question, like this solves their problem.
Yes.
What are the facts?
It's like immediate grounding, especially when you're in a worry cycle. You're like, and it's like, what are the facts? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, blah, blah, blah. Like, no. What are I don't want to hear your story again because that story is the thing that's making you feel this way. Mm-hmm. What are the facts here? And I could one of my favorite things to do as a coach too, when people kind of tell a story very dramatically, is I will go, okay, pause everything. Now tell me that whole story, but only in facts. And I coach a lot of coaches and I know they know what facts are. And so they kind of chuckled to themselves a little bit. But there's just something about knowing what reality is and truth is that grounds us and gets us out of that spin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the facts? And then, I love that one. Okay. How can this fear actually be useful? Tell me about that.
What can I learn from it?
Okay.
Yeah, what can I extract from this? Because once, if you've asked what are the facts first, and then that one, it's like, oh, okay, so there's probably some things that maybe I could do differently. Because guys, remember what fear is? It does protect us. It keeps us out of harm's way. Yeah. Like real harm's way. Mm-hmm. So maybe there is some prudent fear kind of wrapped up in a lot of dramatic fear and a lot of that rumination. Mm-hmm. So this kind of just narrows it down a little bit, but what actually could be useful from this? How can I prudently move forward?
Yes. And folks, I think you guys can take this or leave this, but this has been something that's helpful for me. And it even has to do with the triggers, right? So again, trigger response, there's always when we're being reactive to some circumstance around us and we're showing up, there's fear that's behind that trigger. And triggers are trailheads. It's always, I think this is a universal. The Lord allows these triggers because he wants to reveal to us where his charity is lacking in our lives. And so if that's the case, there's or where we have not yet opened ourselves up to a relationship with the Lord, where we're still grasping at self-control or we're trying to bootstrap it ourselves, the Lord is inviting us to first grow aware, but then to surrender as he wants to flow into those rooms of our heart.
That's it. It's perfect love casts out all fear. And so it's like, what if this fear isn't such a terrible thing? What if it's a perfect opportunity for you to invite Jesus' perfect love in? Which I love. So take a step back, right? Because my connectedness is over the top right now.
Do it.
So think about when you're breaking up with somebody, okay? And let's just say you do have a relationship with the Lord. Who do you ask to come into your heart after you break up with somebody who you've just given your heart to and your heart's broken? You're like, you ask Jesus to. Because he's the one who can heal it, right? And fill it. And it's the same way. He's not just saying that because it sounds nice, like perfect love casts out fear. It's like, no, I want to be invited into those fear places.
Yes. And then when Jesus shows up, he says, "You dummy, you shouldn't be so afraid. What's wrong with you?" It's like, it's not how he shows up. Like, this is a beautiful thing about when you invite Jesus in, and I love this next thing. In those moments where you recognize there's fear and you invite the Lord in and you ask Jesus, what do you see in this situation? Jesus, like, what would you speak to this fear? And then just listening. Folks, like, we can't tell you what he's going to say. We can give you like all these reframes and scripts and everything till forever, but it's not going to speak to the intimate, particular place where you feel, you know, where that fear is for you. Yeah. Right. But Jesus can. Right. And I don't want you to just grow in a relationship with Aaron and I and on the podcast. We want to pass you over to the eternal life coach here that can speak in such a intimate, particular way to what you're going through in that moment in a way that really does transform, and it brings you into a deeper relationship with the Lord. And that relationship, guys, it transforms. It actually transforms. That place of fear now becomes a place of intimacy. And now it becomes a place of gift. Freedom and gifts.
Faith.
Like you become that sincere gift of self because the Lord has purged, you know, the enemy from that area of your life, and he has made his home in you, or at least in that room that you've just opened up to him. Boom.
I think that's it.
Yeah. So guys, like, the Prac app here is just taking these questions that we've given to you and just getting that curiosity engaged, all right? And there's something very healing that goes on with this. It's almost like an exposure therapy approach to things.
Just, I mean, bring Jesus into it, okay? Because, like, when you think of David and Goliath, you think of, like, all these stories, like Peter walking out on the water, all these areas that people would be afraid. And they do it.
Yes.
But also that allowance and you know, permission to be where you're at right now, still bring that to Jesus. Like, I love what you brought up, like, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. You know, so, like, just kind of be where you're at with it, but just be honest with where you are with God. It doesn't have to be with us, but it can be with us if you want to come and work with us.
Come to the academy here, you guys. Like, we have regular group coaching calls, and sometimes you can jump in on there and just bring some of those obstacles that are showing up that are keeping you from that apostolic mission, that unique mission that the Lord has for your life. The academy is a place for you to realize the gifts and all the resources that the Lord has given to you, name them, claim them, and then also discern where is he calling you to aim those things. And it could be starting an apostolate, could be starting a .org, could be something where you're just being more intentional within your family life and within your own Christian vocation, or within your parish, within your church, within your community. Absolutely those things. And so becoming the best version of yourself will always entail naming and claiming the gifts that God has given to you, and then entering into a relationship where you're discerning with the Lord where he's calling you to use those in the present moment.
Let me ask you something.
What?
Every time you say best version of yourself, do you feel like you need to say it like Matthew Kelly? Because I know I do.
A little bit.
Best version of yourself.
Best version of yourself.
We love Matthew Kelly.
He is. Rock and roll, Matthew Kelly. Like, this is it. But, like, I tell you what, if you ever thought, like, yeah, I'm inspired, I want to be the best version of myself, come to the academy here, folks, because, like, that is where we're doing the practical accompaniment, walking with you. You can get the one-on-one coaching from the people that have actually gone through a certification. They can work through some of these unique battles that you're encountering, and just help you to build some of these emotional and mental resilience skills that you need to have in order to engage this battle well and step into that unique mission God has for you.
Boom.
Cool.
That's
it. We can't wait to see you guys in the academy. Sign up for that free trial. Link is in the bio here. Link in the bio. Links in the show notes here
somewhere.
For that. Somewhere. CatholicCoaching.com. CatholicCoaching.com. Join the academy. Start your 7-day free trial. Cool.
Bye, guys.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.